Amir grew up in the dusty town of Meadowvale, where a single paved road stretched past the corner bakery, the post office, and the small blue house his mother Aisha cleaned each dawn. From his first steps, Amir heard only his mother's gentle voice cheering him on, because his father had vanished like a skipped stone across a pond when work took him overseas and never brought him back. Aisha sold handmade quilts in the weekend market, patching bright squares of leftover cloth under a flickering lamp after Amir fell asleep so she could buy his school shoes every winter. She taught Amir that family was a tree with deep roots, telling him that if the trunk stayed strong the branches could sway safely in every storm the sky dared throw their way. Amir promised himself that one day he would plant a bigger tree for her, one with golden fruit that tasted of security and gratitude, because he believed kindness should echo louder than hardship. Years passed like pages in a wind-flipped book, and Amir earned a scholarship to the bustling city college where tall buildings blocked the horizon, neon billboards blinked, and every sidewalk buzzed with dreams wearing sneakers. During his first semester, he met Zara, whose laughter sounded like the splash of a fountain on a summer day, and whose keen eyes caught every small kindness Amir tried to hide. They studied algebra at the library's back table, marking equations with neon sticky notes while sharing jokes about how numbers were shy storytellers that only spoke truth when arranged just right. Soon evening study sessions turned into weekend walks, and weekend walks turned into midnight phone calls where they built castles of future plans out of words alone. After graduation, Amir brought Zara to Meadowvale, showing her the quilt shop, the bakery, and the old blue house where Aisha waited with tea sweetened by anticipation. Aisha's eyes brightened at the sight of her son, yet when she noticed Zara's hand in his, she blinked once, as if dust had flown into her memory of being his only horizon. Over dinner, Aisha asked gentle questions about Zara's family and her hopes, but beneath each polite smile, Amir sensed the tremor of two worlds quietly measuring how close they could safely stand without bruising old memories. Zara spoke warmly of dreams to open a children's reading room in the city, and Aisha nodded, though her folded hands tightened as if holding fragile hope that her son would stay nearby. When the evening ended, Amir hugged his mother, feeling the soft threadbare sweater she wore every winter, and he heard her whisper, "My home is yours, always," a promise woven with invisible worry. Back in the city, wedding plans bloomed like morning glories, bright and urgent, and Amir juggled guest lists, caterers, and job interviews that might lift him and Zara into their next chapter. Aisha called each night, asking whether he was eating well, whether he needed help, but her voice sometimes carried the sigh of a lullaby sung to an empty cradle. One evening she gently suggested holding the ceremony in Meadowvale so neighbors who helped raise Amir could share his joy. Yet Zara had already reserved a city hall rooftop with views of starlit skyscrapers and distant bridges. Amir felt like a bridge stretched between two shores, each calling him with familiar music, and he wondered if bridges ever wished they could be a simple stone instead. He chose Zara's plan, thinking his mother would understand that love wrote new maps, yet doubt pricked him like hidden thorns beneath celebration ribbons. The wedding sparkled with fairy lights, clinking glasses, and laughter, but a single empty seat in the front row echoed louder than the band, because Aisha stayed behind with a quiet apology, a broken smile, and a plate of untouched sweets. After the honeymoon, Amir tried to smooth the distance by visiting Meadowvale every weekend, though the drive felt longer when carried by regret rather than excitement. Zara found a teaching job in the city and filled her apartment with picture books, while Amir spent late nights coding at a tech startup that paid him in pizza and promises of stock options. Bills piled like unsorted letters, and the young couple often ate instant noodles, laughing that adventure tasted like spiced broth when shared from the same pot. One Friday, Amir discovered a letter from the bank warning of late mortgage fees on the old blue house, red stamps shouting like furious roosters at dawn, and worry coiled around him tighter than the winter wind. He called his mother, who admitted quilt sales had slowed since tourists now shopped online and buses bypassed Meadowvale for bigger towns with brighter lights. Amir wanted to send money, but Zara reminded him that their own rent was due. Her teaching salary barely covered groceries, so he promised his mother he would help soon, though the date stayed blurry like fogged glass. Weeks later, Aisha slipped on icy steps and fractured her wrist, leaving her unable to sew. Amir's guilt flared like a signal fire, yet Zara whispered that hospitals cost more than wishes. Amir borrowed from a coworker and wired funds home, but the loan hung over him like a thundercloud, and each paycheck felt smaller after the debt took its bite, snapping at his plans like a hungry stray dog. Tension settled in the apartment, filling silent spaces between kind words, and Amir noticed Zara's smile dim whenever his phone rang with his mother's ringtone. One night they argued over money, love, and geography, their voices rising until neighbors knocked, reminding them that thin walls hear every secret, and silence afterward is heavier than any shouted word. Exhausted, Amir suggested they move to Meadowvale, where living was cheaper and Aisha could help with future grandchildren. Yet Zara said her dreams needed the city's louder rhythm and brighter sky. Amir felt his heart tilt, as if two planets pulled him with equal gravity, and he wondered which orbit his son should choose when both worlds were worthy. The next morning, he drove alone to Meadowvale to check on his mother, passing leafless fields that looked like empty notebooks waiting for springtime stories. At the Blue House, he found unpaid bills stacked like falling dominoes, dust gathering on the hallway clock, and his mother's wrist still wrapped, her smile brave but brittle as uncooked pasta. She insisted she was fine, but when she reached for a cup, her hand trembled, spilling tea onto the faded tablecloth that carried decades of breakfast chatter. Amir's resolve hardened like wet clay in sunlight, and he decided to bring her home with him so she could heal surrounded by city doctors and warm meals. He phoned Zara, expecting relief, yet her silence stretched longer than signal lag, and finally she asked if he had measured their tiny apartment against 3 hearts and 1 fragile future. Amir realized he had not even measured his own fears, because regret hides in corners until a single decision pushes it into the center of the room. He promised Zara they would manage, but his voice shook, and he suspected promises were like kites that flew only when strong winds of action lifted them. As he loaded his mother's suitcase, Amir felt the first sting of understanding that choosing love is simple in stories but messy in real life, and he prayed the road back would show him how to mend torn chapters. Amir drove slowly toward the city, winter sun sliding over the windshield in orange stripes, while his mother held her bandaged wrist, counted telephone poles, and watched gray fields fall quietly behind them. He described the corner cafe that smelled of cinnamon rolls, the park with bright swings that squeaked like gulls, and the library where Zara stacked colorful storybooks like towers built from candy blocks. Aisha confessed she had never lived beyond Meadowvale, explaining that apartment walls piled over neighbors sounded to her like trying to sleep inside a restless beehive that hummed all through the night. Amir squeezed her hand gently and promised the city could be friendly, reminding her that every window held a tiny family story and that laughter often drifted through curtains like warm morning breeze. Fog curled around the river bridge like pale ribbon, and Aisha whispered a soft prayer that the water below would carry away her tangled worries exactly as it carried autumn leaves toward unseen lakes. Traffic thickened like oatmeal left too long on the stove, horns honking in crooked rhythms, and Amir wondered if the noisy chaos might actually be a hidden song he simply had not learned to sing yet. At dusk they reached the narrow brick building, amber streetlights blinking on like shy stars greeting dusk, and Zara met them at the curb holding a paper bag filled with bread that smelled of home. Zara hugged Aisha gently to avoid the injured wrist and promised steaming soup, crisp linens, and a sturdy chair beside the window where sunrise always painted the wall with buttery gold light. The elevator rattled upward like an old roller coaster, and Aisha clutched Amir's arm, staring at numbered buttons glowing green like tiny lanterns guiding them to a level she had only seen in movies. Inside, she saw how small rooms could feel brave because every inch displayed a hope. A basil plant sprouting new leaves, Zara's chalkboard of bright lesson plans, and Amir's laptop humming quietly. Amir guided her to the pine table, sweeping overdue bills beneath a magazine about mountain hiking, though red stamps still peeked out like stern eyes that refused to be hidden by polite gestures. Zara ladled thick vegetable soup into chipped bowls, steam curling up like gray cats, and she talked about students who believe math problems were secret maps left by cheeky pirates hiding jeweled chests. Aisha laughed, surprised by her own voice, and recalled young Amir wearing quilt scraps as superhero capes, leaping off porch steps to rescue stuffed bears from imaginary floods of pillow water. They ate slowly until Amir asked how long the doctor said her wrist needed rest. Aisha sighed that 6 weeks felt forever, but admitted patience often mends bone faster than fretting can. Amir's stomach tightened like a drawn bowstring, yet he nodded, deciding to claim extra shifts, even if coding stretched until dawn painted the sky gray and the birds began their early choir. Zara offered to tutor neighborhood kids for a small fee, explaining that multiplication tables, spelling bees, and silly rhymes could fit easily between her school hours and bedtime tea. Aisha squeezed her hand with gentle fingers and murmured that kindness shared among 3 people grows faster than any unpaid bill piling silently in a drawer. After dishes, Aisha sat by the window and watched headlights weave below like silver minnows, marveling that city streets became glowing rivers once the night wrapped in darkness. She told Amir the noise frightened her less than she expected because every horn or shout reminded her that countless dreamers traveled those roads, weaving separate stories into one grand tapestry. Amir unfolded a creaky cot in the living room and draped one of her brightest quilts across it, turning the cramped corner into a patchwork meadow sprinkled with memories of simpler evenings. Before sleep, he opened his laptop to finish a bug fix, but thoughts of the bank letter blurred the screen until lines of code resembled raindrops sliding down a forgotten windowpane. He pictured the blue house sitting silent, paint peeling like confetti from an old party, and wondered whether roofs remember laughter echoes or only notice the silence that follows goodbye. Determined, he drafted a plan to find weekend freelance work, believing one extra phone app could stitch their money gap just as his mother patched torn pockets with steady hands. Days settled like fresh snow inside a globe. The three shared one bathroom, one stove, and countless whispered promises that tomorrow would inch them closer to solvency. Each dawn, Amir brewed strong tea before sunrise, tiptoeing around cardboard boxes so as not to wake Zara, while Aisha sketched quilt patterns inspired by skylines and tangled subway rails. Evenings he hauled discount groceries upstairs like a circus juggler, and Zara graded homework at the table, pausing to teach Aisha cheerful city slang such as chill and awesome. On Fridays, they pushed furniture aside for gentle stretches, laughing when old folk songs bounced off thin walls, and the grumpy downstairs neighbor tapped his ceiling in mock protest. Monday brought word of a performance bonus at Amir's job. He volunteered for the toughest module, seeing hope glimmer within extra lines of code like a lighthouse beam across choppy water. Nights melted into marathon typing, and when red error messages flashed, he breathed deeply, picturing his mother a nodding thread patiently under lamplight, never once raising her voice. During a roaring storm, power failed. Amir lit 3 half-melted birthday candles found in a drawer, and they exchanged stories under flickering light while rain drummed the balcony rail. Aisha compared cricket songs in the village to distant sirens here, noting that both sounds warned of life moving on, and she decided each darkness carries its own secret chorus. The next day, Zara surprised her with a small radio playing gentle classics. Together they tuned stations until old melodies braided childhood memories with shiny new dreams. Medical bills soon arrived, crisp as ice, yet Amir treated them like puzzles, slicing giant totals into smaller sums that looked less scary on lined notebook paper. He built a simple website for quilt sales, letting visitors spin a digital carousel of patterns stitched from fabric scraps and well-fed hope. Orders trickled in, first from Zara's coworkers, then from faraway strangers, and Aisha's cheeks glowed as she packed boxes padded with handwritten thank you notes and lavender sprigs. The apartment now smelled of fresh cotton and herbs, and Amir realized breakthrough often starts as a single pulled thread others might overlook. Space soon felt tight again. He noticed Zara sigh whenever she squeezed past the cot or searched shelves overcrowded with shipping supplies and coding manuals. One soft Saturday, Aisha suggested returning home once healed, claiming the blue house missed her footsteps and the young couple deserved breathing space to grow. Amir felt torn like paper between wind and scissors, yet he asked her to wait until the bank issue ended, promising bright days full of quilt colors and city lights. Under a buzzing ceiling lamp they hugged, and Amir vowed to balance every fragile hope like spinning plates until he could stitch all loose seams into one strong family blanket. Morning sunlight slid through the kitchen window as Amir watched his mother hum softly, tucking another bright quilt into a cardboard box, her healing wrist still stiff yet moving with practiced care. Online orders now arrived faster than puffed steam from their kettle, but shipping fees nibbled away profits, so Amir balanced phone spreadsheets while stirring oatmeal for breakfast. Zara filmed Aisha explaining each patch, the clip melting hearts online and doubling followers overnight as viewers shared emoji-filled stories of quilts their own grandmothers had sewn. Requests poured in from teachers needing reading corner blankets and campers wanting home-like comfort, each promising photos of smiling kids wrapped in adventure-colored fabric. Each happy ping still echoed beside a harsher note, because the bank kept calling about his mother's mortgage, warning that grace periods end whether or not hope keeps growing. Amir spent lunch breaks on hold, reciting account numbers until his voice cracked, but the answer stayed the same: pay soon or lose the blue house, while the scratchy hold music dragged like a slow summer day. That evening, Zara warned her school might cut first-year teachers, and fear seeped into the apartment like cold air under an old door, chilling them to silence. Aisha brewed mint tea and set 3 chipped mugs on the table, asking them to sip slowly and breathe out worries with esteem. Yet the gentle scent could not smooth the wrinkles worry carved across their brows. Amir dove into another late-night coding sprint, chasing an elusive bonus while blinking red error messages flashed warnings like tiny stoplights. Dawn found him pacing the balcony, orange sky below, wishing he could program an undo button big enough for real life. With her cast removed early, Aisha flexed her wrist proudly and suggested returning to Meadowvale so costs would drop and the couple could breathe. Amir pictured her alone with creaking floors and shivering nights, and his chest tightened like a knot pulled too hard, a knot that seemed to tug at every hopeful thread he tried to weave. Zara, tired of bumping into quilt boxes, quietly agreed that space would help their marriage feel less like a storage closet, dreaming of a living room big enough for dance moves and quiet Sunday naps. Aisha sensed the tension and promised to leave when the new moon appeared, hoping the timing would bless all three, because in her village new moons meant new chances stitched into dark skies. Days slipped by like soap and running water, each one a tug of war between clinging together and reaching for air, and each side warned the rope might snap if they pulled one tug more. The startup CEO dangled transfers to Dubai with salaries that could silence every bill and repaint the blue house. Excitement and guilt rose together in Amir. Beaches and bright towers danced in Amir's mind, but so did empty chairs at family dinners and lagging video calls that freeze during important words, imagining screenshots freezing on his mother's smile mid-laugh. Aisha clapped at the chance, yet Zara frowned, saying dreams built on sand can wash away the moment someone upstream changes course, a lesson she learned from riverbanks that change shape yet keep flowing. Amir wrote pros and cons on yellow sticky notes, covering the fridge until the surface looked like a sunflower desperate for sunlight. The heaviest con was leaving his mother alone, yet the loudest pro shouted that income could rescue her home and their own fragile future. The bank, however, would not accept promises, reminding Amir that calendars, not intentions, decide foreclosure dates. Numbers, they said, are the only language money speaks. Meanwhile, followers begged Aisha for live workshops, offering real money, and she practiced speaking to a laptop camera, proud yet nervous. The little webcam lens felt like a stage light brighter than noon sun. Zara designed bright slides and giggled when a filter accidentally placed cartoon sunglasses over Aisha's serious lesson on neat knots, turning the kitchen into a studio where laughter stuck to the tiles. Their shared laughter widened the apartment for a moment, as if joy could push walls outward without a single nail. For 3 breaths, they believed walls could be convinced to grow wider. The first paid class went well until a brief power cut froze Aisha mid-sentence. Frantic, Amir reset the breaker, and applause returned like sunlight, reminding him that even darkness can be fixed by hands that refuse panic. They celebrated with cheap pizza and orange soda, clinking plastic cups that tasted like victory despite their thin rims, glad the crust was not crumbs. At dawn, a final notice slid under the door, its red ink sharp enough to steal the cheer from leftover crusts. The envelope hit the floor like a hammer striking a fragile bell, echoing. Amir read the deadline twice, words swimming like tiny fish, and realized no quilt class or bonus could raise that sum in 10 days, a sum so large it felt like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. Selling his tiny stock stake might help, yet mentors warned that trading seedlings for a quick snack leaves the garden empty later, and stomachs cannot thrive on the memory of unplanted gardens. Aisha offered her wedding bangles wrapped in red velvet, but Amir refused, unwilling to cash in memories to fix his choices, a refusal gentle but firm like closing a door before winter wind. Zara phoned her parents for help, yet their savings were already bruised by last year's hospital bills, and their apologies crossed the crackling line like birds searching for safe roofs. That night, thunder rattled the windows, lightning strobing Amir's worried face as he stared at city lights smeared by rain. Each thunderclap felt like the world stamping paid on overdue fears. A sudden memory of the kind town lawyers surfaced, and Amir dialed the number with shaking fingers, wondering if long-forgotten favors could sprout like seeds in fresh soil. The lawyer explained a new relief program could pause foreclosure if the house hosted community art workshops that drew visitors, turning the threat of auction signs into a temporary pause button. Aisha's quilts already attracted online tourists, so the plan seemed like a sturdy bridge over a sudden flood. Suddenly, the flood seemed crossable, even if the bridge swayed in wind. Hope rushed through the apartment, but Amir saw Zara's tight smile, aware that every reprieve came with fresh chores and thinner margins. Promises, she feared, stretched like rubber bands that eventually snap. As midnight ticked, they drafted tasks on a shared notepad, promising to film classes, schedule shipments, and rest when success allowed. They ended the list with one sentence: stick together, no matter what. Amir finally lay down, the ceiling spinning with numbers and miles, knowing every path asked him to trade one promise for another, realizing that even silence weighs less when shared. He whispered a silent apology to both women for choices he had not yet made, hoping the night would hold the word safe, trusting the dark to keep secrets until morning decided their fates. Between heartbeats and distant sirens, Amir admitted he could not keep everyone happy forever but vowed to keep them together, gripping that promise like the last rope in a storm. Morning broke with pale light, and Amir woke early to move stacks of quilt boxes so the kitchen could transform into a tiny craft studio for the online class that promised to save the Blue House. Zara taped colored arrows on the floor, showing where his mother should step, while Aisha practiced smiling into the webcam, her voice trembling like a small bird testing fresh feathers above a windy cliff. Before the live stream began, Amir brewed cinnamon tea for everyone and whispered that today could be a turning point, but his own stomach fluttered harder than the teabag tag flicking against the cup. Viewers joined from 5 countries, sending heart emojis that floated up the screen like soap bubbles, and Aisha's confidence grew until she finished the lesson with a flourish and a proud 2-handed wave. Orders spiked again. Yet as Amir refreshed the sales dashboard, he noticed an unread email from the Dubai recruiter titled Final Offer, its bold letters shining like a lighthouse in a fearful night. The offer doubled his current salary and promised housing with a sea view, a signing bonus large enough to erase the mortgage hole, and medical coverage that sounded like rain on parched soil. Zara gasped with relief, already picturing herself exploring bright souks and teaching in an international school, but Aisha's smile tightened, as if someone had tugged the last knot on her quilt too tight. Amir felt the old tug of war inside his chest, yet this time the rope seemed greased with desperation, and he feared letting go more than the burn of holding on. They promised to think overnight. Amir walked to the balcony where neon lights blinked like cautious fireflies and asked the silent sky for a sign, but clouds only drifted by with no answers written on them. Back inside, Aisha set a fresh quilt square on the table and quietly traced its edges, saying sometimes fabric stretched in one direction until the other edges frayed, and a wise tailor had to decide which thread to cut. Zara listened, then gently reminded that travel could give Amir's mother new treatment options once they settled, framing the move as a journey everyone could share instead of a lonely goodbye. Aisha, not wanting to become an anchor, agreed that she would manage at home if it meant her children sailed toward wider oceans, even though her voice quivered on the word manage. The next morning, Amir signed the digital contract, the clicking mouse louder in his ears than any thunder, and instantly felt both lighter and oddly hollow, like a drum without skin. They set a 2-month timeline, sell excess furniture, ship quilts from Meadowvale, and fly out before the first December snow, trusting that cool desert evenings would trade sorrow for possibility. Neighbors congratulated them, yet Aisha's eyes often drifted to the cracked blue paint and family pictures, as if she were memorizing every detail before time scraped them away. 2 weeks later, the bank approved a short extension contingent on a successful in-person workshop at the Blue House, so the plan shifted again, like pieces on a chessboard nobody fully saw. Because flights were prepaid and visas processing, Amir suggested his mother host the workshop alone, promising local cousins would help, even though he hadn't spoken to them in 3 years. Aisha nodded, but Zara noticed her folding hands slip beneath the table, hiding the tremble that even healed bones sometimes feel when weather or worry press too hard. They packed her suitcase with bright scarves and an old flip phone program with international minutes, and Amir booked a cheap overnight bus, believing the journey would be short compared to the new life ahead. At the terminal, Aisha hugged them both, sliding a small packet of dates into Amir's pocket for energy, and he forced a brave grin while the bus engine coughed awake like an elderly dog. Back at the apartment, Zara exhaled deeply, stretching her arms wide in the suddenly spacious room, and suggested they celebrate with street shawarma. But Amir found the silence tasted like cold tea. Days sprinted by in lists, vaccines, work permits, farewell notes to friends, and late-night YouTube videos teaching basic Arabic phrases that tangled on Amir's tongue. Meanwhile, Aisha cleaned every corner of the Blue House, aired quilts in the weak sun, and stapled workshop flyers to telephone poles, praying each staple fixed her fear in place as well. The lawyer arranged local press coverage, but attendees registered slowly. Many villagers preferred free fairs in bigger towns, and crafts seemed less special when you had seen them your whole life. Amir wired extra money for snacks and chairs, joking that free cookies always draw crowds, though his laugh in the voice message felt thin, like paper almost tearing. Zara landed an interview abroad and ordered suitcases online, comparing pastel colors while Amir scrolled through photos of the Blue House to choose a lock-screen image he would not lose to time zones. One windy evening, the workshop finally arrived. Rain threatened, and half the chairs remained empty, but Aisha still greeted each visitor with warm chai and stories stitched into every fabric square. During a demo, her wrist, still weak, gave a sudden painful twist. Scissors slipped, the quilt edge tore, and a hush fell, broken only by thunder cracking outside like a giant fault line in the sky. The small crowd dispersed quickly, promising to order online later, Yet promises, like clouds, float away if not anchored, and Aisha stood alone amid damp chairs and scattered scraps. She called Amir, voice steady but small, saying turnout was light yet hearts were touched. He congratulated her, swallowing the hard truth that hearts alone cannot repay loans. The next day, the bank reinstated the auction date, 3 weeks away, and Amir realized the timeline overlapped their flight, a collision of calendars he had hoped to outrun. He offered to delay departure, but Zara argued postponements could void visa approvals and waste non-refundable fees bigger than their current monthly rent. Amir reminded her the blue house was more than lumber. It was his mother's whole history, each creak in the floorboards a sentence in a book too precious to delete. Zara cried that she had sacrificed stability for his family's needs since day one and asked where her chapter would finally begin. Her tears shone like streetlights in rain. Words escalated, echoing off bare walls, until both retreated to separate corners, discovering that empty rooms make anger sound larger and love smaller. At dawn, ashamed, Amir drafted emails begging the bank for another delay and the recruiter for flight rescheduling, yet each send button felt like launching prayers into space. Responses came swift and cold. Policies cannot bend, slots cannot hold. The world, it seemed, respected clock hands more than heartbeats. A week later, while finalizing luggage, Amir's phone rang with a neighbor's number. His pulse spiked as if sensing bad news even before sound carried it. The neighbor explained Aisha had fainted after moving heavy boxes to the attic, and she was resting at home, refusing hospital care to save money for the loan. Amir dropped the suitcase, hearing plastic crack, understanding too late that every choice had built a wall between his intentions and his mother's needs, and regret poured into him like cold night rain filling broken gutters. Amir rushed to the closet, grabbed his cracked suitcase patched with tape, and felt guilt burn like hot tea in his chest as he recalled the thud it made on the floor. He told Zara he had to see his mother right away, even if it meant missing the visa office appointment, and her shocked silence felt heavier than any angry words she could have spoken. While hailing a cab, Amir counted his cash twice, knowing the late-bought bus seat would cost extra, yet caring less about money than the image of his mother alone and dizzy. The driver asked where to, and Amir simply said Meadowvale, please hurry, which made the driver raise a brow because the trip was far, but the urgency in Amir's voice ended all questions. Streetlights streaked past the window like comet tails, and Amir stared at them until his vision blurred, thinking about every call he had postponed and every promise he had filed under later. He phoned the airline to push their Dubai tickets, but the hold music circled endlessly, and he hung up before an agent answered because the cab already reached the bus station entrance. The ticket clerk said only one seat remained and quoted a price swallowing half Amir's savings. Amir paid without blinking, feeling time breathe on his neck. Inside the bus, the heater rattled weakly, passengers slept under thin blankets, and Amir sat upright gripping his backpack straps as if holding reins to steer fate back onto the right road. As tires hummed along dark highway miles, regret played scenes on the window, showing him a version of himself who had chosen differently at every fork where family and ambition had wrestled. He promised the sleeping fields he would fix everything, even if it meant tearing one dream to patch another, the way his mother sacrificed bright fabric to mend dull seams. At dawn, the bus rolled into Meadowvale, fog lifting like a curtain to reveal familiar rooftops, and Amir felt both relief and dread twisting together like two ropes in a single braid. He ran the short distance to the blue house, noticing auction notices flapping on the picket fence like crows, and each red stamp felt like a fresh bruise on memory. The front door was unlocked because the old latch never fit right, and he found Aisha awake in the kitchen, wrist wrapped again, sipping weak tea as if nothing in the world was wrong. Her smile tried to rise but fell when she saw the worry on his face, and she apologized for startling him, saying she only fainted because the attic was stuffy and she forgot to open the window. Amir knelt beside her chair, admitting every fear he had hidden, and tears finally slipped because walls were thin here and memories thick, and he no longer wished to be brave at the cost of truth. He explained the auction date, the job abroad, and how the two plans collided like trains on a single track, and she listened without blame, only stroking his hair like when he was small and feverish. Aisha admitted she had known about the final notice but kept silent, hoping her own workshop could solve things so her son would not have to choose between love and opportunity again. The confession cut Amir deeper than the bank letters, for he realized sacrifice was a language his mother spoke fluently, and he had forgotten its grammar while learning the dialect of ambition. He told her he would cancel Dubai immediately, sell the tickets, repay the recruiter, and move home until the quilt business bloomed enough to feed them all. Zara agreed to try small-town life. Aisha shook her head gently, warning that swaps made in panic often turn into new traps, and she asked if his marriage could survive a plan made without both partners holding the pen. Together they opened the kitchen window to cool the room, and dawn light spilled onto the old table, where ledgers, flyers, and colorful scraps lay scattered like puzzle pieces waiting for a picture. Amir fetched the camera and recorded his mother telling her story, this time adding the part about almost losing her home, letting truth be the hook that might bring strangers to help. He posted the video with a plea for sign-ups to a weekend quilt festival, promising every dollar would go towards saving a home that had sheltered kindness for 30 years. Next he called Zara, voice trembling, and told her what happened, asking her to come if she could, or at least forgive the sudden change, assuring her that love did not shrink when distances closed. Zara listened quietly, then said she needed time to think, because promises stretched thin the past had started to tear, and patching them again required steady hands from both sides. Amir accepted her answer, though fear churned inside, and he spent the morning printing new posters, tapping them on store windows, and greeting townsfolk who still remembered him chasing kites in dusty lanes. Some hugged him, some scolded him for staying away so long, yet all agreed to visit the festival, drawn by equal parts nostalgia and curiosity about the boy who left and suddenly returned. By noon, Amir gathered cousins at the diner, treating them to fries in exchange for help clearing the yard, setting up tables, and sharing event links on every phone contact list they owned. Late afternoon brought Zara's text saying she had boarded a bus with spare clothes and open questions, and Amir exhaled a breath he hadn't noticed holding since dawn. He fixed the crooked latch before sunset, wanting the door to welcome rather than warn, and he repainted chips on the porch rail with leftover sky blue so the house could smile back at visitors. That night, mother and son packed quilts into neat stacks, marking prices low because time pressed like a thumb on a bruise. Over simple dinner, they planned demonstration stations, children's crafting corners, and a story wall where guests could pin notes about blankets that kept them safe through storms or sleepless nights. Amir wrote a list of chores for the morning and realized none included calling a recruiter, a fact that both frightened and freed him, like stepping onto ice you trust will hold. He sent one final email to followers offering a limited quilt drop at dawn. When orders flooded in within minutes, he saw numbers large enough to cover a quarter of the debt, and his heart leaped. Aisha placed her hand over the figures, reminding him they still needed the festival to succeed. For loans, see only the whole sum, never the distance already climbed. Later, under a quilt of patchwork stars, Amir lay on a couch listening to frogs outside, and he whispered thanks for the chance to try again, even if the outcome remained a mystery. Sleep came slow but steady, rolling over him like a gentle tide, and in dreams he walked a winding path where his wife and mother stood together, stitching two halves of a map into one bright banner. He woke before sunrise, feeling the dream linger like morning mist, and he understood the day would demand all his courage but would repay him with something more solid than salary, the chance to heal. While birds trilled, he brewed coffee, opened the door to the first vendor arriving early, and felt an unfamiliar peace as if regret, though not erased, had finally found a seat beside resolve. With every beat of his heart, he repeated silent words, save the house, mend the bonds, honor the roots, and he stepped into the pale gold daylight ready to fight for more than one dream at a time. Morning of the quilt festival dawned cool, and Amir wiped dew from folding chairs while grass brushed his ankles, as crickets gave their last chirps before sunlight chased them away. Colorful banners fluttered across the yard like friendly dragons, each one painted by cousins during a midnight art rush fueled by lemonade, fries, and a loud playlist of old pop songs. Zara's bus arrived as the first trucks pulled up, and she hurried through the gate with cheeks pink from travel, carrying a stack of flyers and the hope that today might stitch every torn feeling closed. Aisha met her with a long hug that said no apology was needed, and together they tied matching sky blue scarves that marked them as hosts, letting the fabric flap like little victory flags. By 9 o'clock, neighbors packed the lawn, toddlers dashed between quilt racks, and the smell of cinnamon buns drifted from the church lady's stand, wrapping the morning in a scent warmer than any blanket. Amir balanced his phone on a tripod to live stream every grin, knowing faraway viewers might become guests whose clicks tipped the balance between fear and relief. At the demo table, Aisha showed how a tiny running stitch could hold two worlds together, and her words carried beyond the speaker, landing softly on distant hearts. Zara taught kids to cut fabric stars, praising every crooked point until shy faces brightened like sunflowers, while a grandma wiped a tear remembering her own first sewing lesson. The town lawyers stopped by with the bank manager, both wearing cautious smiles, and Amir's stomach flipped like a pancake on a hot pan when they quietly asked for a quick conversation beside the birdbath. They explained the house auction would pause if the festival raised half the overdue sum before sunset, a mountain-sized goal that at least had a peak he could see. Amir thanked them, then dashed to the tally booth where cousins updated numbers with chalk made dusty by excitement, the blackboard already glazed white like a frosted window. Online orders pinged upward each minute, boosted by viewers who typed, "Save the Blue House," in rainbow emojis that scrolled faster than anyone could read. Near noon the sun grew hot, so Zara handed out paper fans printed with quilt blocks, and the lawn turned into a fluttering patchwork visible even to the little drone filming overhead. A sudden gust flipped a box of baby blankets, but laughing kids chased them down, turning trouble into a bright game of tag parents filmed for later smiles. A local guitarist played old tunes, toes tapped, heads bobbed, and his open case filled with shiny coins. Aisha's wrist ached, yet she refused to sit, reminding guests that strong threads do not quit even when needles pause. Other shoppers followed, turning the booth into a cheerful rush that sounded like popcorn popping at the fair. Her quiet words drifted with rustling leaves, settling in Amir's heart like birds determined to stay through winter. They sealed that vow with linked pinkies, a childhood gesture stronger than any stamped contract. An hour before sunset, the chalkboard showed they were close but still short by thousands, and a hush slid over the yard like a damp cloud. Mr. Khan, the orchard owner, stood on a bench and offered to auction his first Honeycrisp basket for the cause. Cheers climbed high, and a distant thunderclap answered like applause from the sky. The tally now sat within reach, but shadows stretched tall, and guests began folding chairs, and panic scratched at Amir. Online viewers noticed and poured digital tips. Each ping sounded like a raindrop. Donations flashed in every currency symbol, making the screen look like a glowing patchwork of promises. Their embrace drew a cheer, and someone rang an old school bell to mark the debt's defeat. The banker issued a receipt on the picnic table and joked that quilt power might be the next renewable energy. New friendships formed in the laughter's echo, proving joy can turn strangers into cousins in a single afternoon. The blue house glowed in orange light, seeming to draw itself taller. Aisha pressed her palm to the rail and thanked the wood for guarding family stories. Inside, they stacked coins, crumpled bills, and screenshots into neat piles that turned shaky total solid. The idea won quick agreement. Soon the community paper ran it on page 1. While cousins cleaned, Amir brewed sweet tea, steam curling like a quiet victory flag. A recruiter message flashed, asking if Amir still planned to fly. Zara passed the decision back with a raised eyebrow. For the first time in months, he felt taller than his doubts, like a tree no storm could shake. Zara said adventure lived in small towns too, especially when love wrote the guide. They waved goodbye to the last guests, stars pinning night's quilt above Meadowvale. A soft breeze carried leftover laughter, and Amir knew the sound would outlast any city siren. His mother rocked on the porch, eyes shining with double starlight. She said roots lift wings, and wings plant new groves. Wisdom he folded into his heart. Peace settled on them like a well-made quilt as the moon rose, promising their stitches would hold through every storm. After the festival ended and the last lantern faded, Amir, Zara, and Aisha sat around the Blue House kitchen table, letting quiet settle over them like a quilt sewn from shared effort and fresh hope. Outside, dew formed on folding chairs left drying on the lawn, and crickets started their steady night chorus, reminding the family that ordinary times still marched even after landmark victories. Amir cleared his throat, admitting that although the mortgage was safe, the Dubai offer still glowed in his inbox like a faraway star that promised riches yet asked him to leave the sky he loved. Zara squeezed his hand and said she had learned during the festival that adventure is not only a place on a map but a story written with whoever stays beside you when the lights go out. Aisha smiled, explaining that elders fear being forgotten, yet tonight she felt more visible than ever because the two of them had fought for the house that carried her memories. The clock ticked, and Amir wondered aloud if staying in Meadowvale made sense, since online sales were rising and the town hoped for monthly fairs that could turn the Blue House into a known landmark. Zara nodded, sharing her plan to open a reading nook in the unused back room, imagining shelves of picture books and beanbags where children could dream among quilt colors and the faint smell of cinnamon. Aisha clapped, thrilled at the picture, and promised to sew floor cushions shaped like giant patchwork apples so kids could sit comfortably while learning new words spelled in bright ink. Still, Amir worried about long-term bills, so he phoned the startup recruiter right there, asking if remote work was possible, and to his surprise the recruiter happily agreed, valuing talent over location. The news made the room burst with relieved laughter, and Zara fetched 3 chipped mugs, filling them with sweet chai that steamed upward like tiny ghosts carrying whispered congratulations. Over chai, they drafted a simple schedule: mornings for quilts and reading lessons, afternoons for coding and shipping, evenings for walks under quiet stars that cost nothing but gave plenty. The plan felt balanced like a three-legged stool, each person holding one leg, and together the stool stood firm even on the uneven floorboards that squeaked in protest at their sudden optimism. Later, Amir stepped onto the porch and saw neighbors chatting by the gate, so he waved them in for leftover pie, deciding that no triumph should finish without extra slices shared. The impromptu gathering turned into a candlelit sing-along, with Mr. Khan strumming gentle notes on the borrowed guitar, while children dozed on quilts spread like colorful islands on the wooden floor. At midnight, the final guests left, thanking the family for reminding the town what unity felt like, and Amir closed the door with a heart so full it seemed to echo each thank you in steady beats. He walked through the house checking locks, noticing fresh scuffs on walls and smiling, because each mark meant people had cared enough to touch the place he once thought might be lost forever. In the hallway, he paused at a photo of his late father holding baby Amir, and for the first time the picture gave courage instead of sorrow, as if his father blessed a new beginning. Upstairs, he found Zara asleep, folded by fatigue like soft paper. He kissed her forehead and whispered that choosing her had led him back to choosing everyone, a circle that finally felt right. Downstairs, Aisha stitched quietly under a small lamp, refusing to rest until one final order was finished. Amir offered to help tie knots, and she laughed, teasing that even tech sons can learn simple loops. Working together, they talked about turning the attic into a guest loft for future volunteers, dreaming of summer workshops where visitors could sleep under roofs filled with dawn birdsong and heritage. When the quilt was done, Aisha sighed contentedly and told Amir that regret is only useful when it leads to repair, and he replied that today had replaced every splinter with stronger wood. Mother and son cleaned the table, folded fabric, and finally switched off the lamp, leaving the house dark except for moonlight that crept through lace curtains and quiet silver stripes. Amir lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling, replaying the year's roller coaster, amazed that a single decisive moment, signing the Dubai contract, had twisted into an even bigger decision to tear it up. He realized choices are seeds. Some sprout into thorny bushes of regret, and others bloom into gardens of gratitude, and tonight he felt at last like a gardener willing to tend both soil and soul. Morning arrived with finches arguing happily in a mulberry tree, and Amir brewed coffee strong enough to rival sunrise, eager for the first normal day of their extraordinary new plan. Zara joined him on the porch, wrapped in a quilt that smelled like lavender, and together they watched delivery vans roll up for the latest bulk shipment that cousins had arranged through the town co-op. Aisha stepped outside next, holding a handwritten thank you note for each driver, and the drivers blushed, unaccustomed to being greeted like heroes before 8 o'clock. By noon, half the boxes were gone, invoices signed, and Amir's phone buzzed with confirmation of his flexible work contract, sealing the last crack in their patched livelihood. In celebration, Zara led them on a picnic at the old river bend, where sandstone bluffs reflected golden on the water, and they skipped stones that tucked small rings of ripples into the current. Amir's stone bounced 3 times before sinking, and he chuckled that even skipped stones eventually settle, much like roaming sons who finally understand where their best story is printed. Aisha told him to write that line down for the reading nook wall, because every child needs to know adventures can end in peaceful harbors without losing their sparkle. Back home, they tackled the attic, sweeping dust and sorting forgotten trunks, each forgotten object sparking stories that braided the past into the plans unfurling downstairs. Zara found Amir's childhood comic books and decided to create a lending shelf, while Aisha uncovered her wedding sari and hung it near the window so sunset could kiss its rich colors each evening. During a break, Amir checked social media and saw the festival video trending under the tag hashtag #QuiltSaveHomes, drawing messages from people asking how to host similar events in their towns. He replied eagerly, offering starter kits and virtual coaching, sensing that Meadowvale's rescue could ripple outward like those river stones, turning small chances into wide circles of change. That evening, the banker personally delivered documents voiding the foreclosure process, and he joked that the mortgage computer system had never before listed quilts as partial collateral. They all laughed, signing final papers with pens Aisha had wrapped in tiny fabric sleeves stitched hurriedly that afternoon, proving useful art can also be whimsical. At supper, Amir poured sparkling cider into mismatched cups, proposing a toast to second chances, and Zara added to first homes, while Aisha raised hers to shared roots. The clink echoed softly, and in that moment regret finally loosened its grip on Amir's heart, drifting away like a leaf that had done its job of pointing toward the better path. Later, under a sky crowded with stars, the three lit sparklers on a porch, tracing bright names in the dark and laughing when lines tangled.